Curiosity and asking questions are some of the most basic human instincts. Our series, 230 Questions on Philosophy and History, explores humanity's efforts to understand the universe, nature, and itself. In this video series, we'll start with the mythological roots of philosophy and trace its historical development, the contributions of different schools of thought, and the fundamental questions that have shaped human thought. The first video in our series consists of 60 questions and covers a wide range of topics, from the connections between mythology and philosophy to the ideas of the Milesian School. What bridges were built in the transition from mythology to philosophy? And what does Thales' water-based understanding of the universe represent? With questions like these, we question the building blocks of philosophy. This video doesn't just present information, it also invites you to think, question, and develop new perspectives. Understanding the origins of philosophy is an important step in both understanding the past and adding a deeper meaning to today's world. Let's take the first step into the fascinating world of philosophy. Questions about the relationship between mythology and philosophy. Question 1. What bridges were built in the transition from mythology to philosophy? Mythology, as the first narratives used to explain nature, the universe, and humans, formed the first steps of philosophy in humanity's effort to make sense of its surroundings. In the transition from mythology to philosophy, the search for logical explanations, the explanation of events by natural causes rather than supernatural beings, played a bridging role. For example, cosmogonic myths, which try to understand the order of the universe, later inspired the natural philosophy studies of the Milesian philosophers. Question 2. How did the gods in Greek mythology and their characteristics reflect on philosophical thought? The gods in Greek mythology represent human behavior and natural events. For example, Zeus symbolizes order and authority. Athena symbolizes wisdom and strategy. These anthropomorphic gods allowed philosophers to think about human nature, ethics, and morality. The powers represented by the gods found their place in philosophical discussions as more abstract concepts. Question 3. How was the concept of chaos transferred from mythology to philosophy? In mythology, chaos is the unorganized, shapeless beginning of the universe. This idea evolved into concepts in philosophy that question the relationship between order and disorder. For example, Anaximander's concept of apeiron, unlimited, infinite, can be considered a philosophical interpretation of chaos. Question 4. How did the cosmogonic, creation of the universe, narratives in mythology prepare the ground for the questioning of existence in philosophy? Cosmogony attempts to answer the question of how the universe came to be. These narratives influenced the natural philosophers' efforts to explain the beginning of the universe with material elements. For example, elements such as earth, water, and air in mythological creation stories led to the search for basic substances by philosophers such as Thales, Anaximenes, and Empedocles. Question 5. How did heroic epics contribute to the formation of the concepts of virtue and morality in philosophy? Heroic epics highlight the individual's virtues such as courage, loyalty, justice, and sacrifice in the face of challenges. These narratives inspired philosophers such as Socrates and Aristotle to think about moral virtues. For example, Homer's epics Iliad and Odyssey laid the groundwork for philosophical discussions that question how individual virtues are related to society. Question 6. Which themes in Greek mythology coincide with philosophical thoughts? Themes such as chaos and order, justice, destiny, and man's struggle against nature in Greek mythology coincide with philosophical thoughts. For example, the myth of Prometheus bringing fire to humanity has laid the groundwork for philosophical discussions about the cost of knowledge and progress. Question 7. What are the contributions of mythological characters to philosophical thought? Prometheus represents the advancement of knowledge and technology. Sisyphus represents man's struggle against meaningless endeavors. Pandora represents the consequences of curiosity and responsibility, thus forming the basis of philosophical concepts. Question 8. What are the main differences between mythology and philosophy? While mythology relies on supernatural powers in its explanations, philosophy focuses on rational and logical explanations. Mythology has an intuitive and narrative structure. Philosophy is based on a systematic method of inquiry and analysis. Question 9. How have mythological narratives influenced the way humans question their existence? Mythological narratives have been influential in humanity's understanding of its place in the universe, its destiny, and its responsibilities. God-human relationships and the journeys of heroes have initiated the tradition of questioning the purpose of human life. Question 10. How have the mythological origins of the first philosophers been examined? Although the first philosophers criticized mythological thought, they inherited their concepts and questions from myths. Philosophers such as Thales, Anaximander, and Heraclitus were influenced by myths on subjects such as the beginning of the universe, order, and change. Question 11. How do symbols in mythology represent philosophical concepts? For example, Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, represents cyclicity and infinity. Pandora's box represents the dangers of the unknown and the concept of hope. Prometheus represents man's quest for knowledge and his efforts for liberation. Question 12. What is the meaning of using mythological references in philosophical texts? Mythological references in philosophical texts are used to concretize abstract concepts, give moral lessons, or emphasize the historical roots of the subject matter. For example, Plato, in his allegory of the cave, adopts a mythological narrative style as a philosophical teaching tool. Question 13. How have the creation myths in ancient Greek mythology inspired philosophical thought? The creation myths in Hesiod's work Theogony led to thoughts on the origin of the elements of nature and the order of the universe. This inspired the natural philosophers to search for the material foundations of the universe. Question 14. What is the impact of mythological figures on ethical values? Mythological figures have allowed people to question their notions of right and wrong. For example, Antigone's story presents the conflict between individual morality and state authority as an ethical problem. Question 15. How did mythology shape the worldview of ancient Greek society? Mythology shaped the way ancient Greek society made sense of the relationship between nature, humans, and gods. It provided a collective consciousness that shaped the values of society, its understanding of morality, and its worldview. Questions about the Milesian School and philosophical thoughts. Question 16. What was the main purpose of the Milesian School philosophers? The main purpose of the Milesian School philosophers was to explain the origin and order of the universe with natural and rational reasons, independent of supernatural explanations. By trying to understand the basic principles behind natural events, they aimed to find the first substance of the universe, arche. Question 17. What are the views of Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes on the first substance of the universe? Thales, he argued that the first substance of the universe was water, arche. According to him, water was the source of everything and the basis of life. Anaximander, he defined the first substance not as a specific thing, but as apeiron, an unlimited and infinite principle. Apeiron was an inexhaustible and shapeless force that ensured the order of nature. Anaximenes, he argued that the first substance was air. He argued that air formed other elements through the processes of condensation and rarefaction. Question 18. What are the most important innovations that the Milesian School philosophers brought to philosophy? Explaining nature through rational and natural ways instead of divine and mythological explanations. Questioning the order of the universe and introducing the concept of arche, first principle, to philosophy. Initiating the tradition of examining natural events through observation and reasoning. Question 19. What is the relationship between the philosophy of the Milesian School and the philosophy of later periods? The Milesian School separated philosophy from mythology and initiated a systematic way of thinking. The philosophers of the Socratic period, starting from the basis of the natural philosophy of this school, turned to more abstract subjects such as ethics, politics, and metaphysics. Question 20. How have the ideas of the Milesian School philosophers influenced modern science? They laid the foundation for the modern scientific method, by putting forward the idea that nature can be understood through observation and rational analysis. In particular, the explanation of natural events by natural causes marked the beginning of scientific thought. Question 21. How did the Milesian School's understanding of nature influence the development of natural sciences? Their use of reasoning and observation methods to understand nature paved the way for the development of scientific branches such as physics, astronomy, and biology. Thales' prediction of the solar eclipse is a concrete example of this understanding. Question 22. How did the Milesian School's natural philosophy make sense of human nature? The Milesian School saw man as a part of the universe. By addressing the relationship between man and nature through universal principles, they tried to understand human nature in the context of these principles. Question 23. What is the philosophical meaning of Thales' statement, "Everything is water"? This statement defends the idea that there is a common material basis underlying the diversity in the universe. Thales, thinking that water is the source of life and a universal principle, made the first abstract generalization about nature in philosophy. Question 24. What does Anaximander's apeiron concept represent? Apeiron is an unlimited, shapeless, and inexhaustible principle that constitutes all the elements of the universe. According to Anaximander, apeiron is the source of the cyclical order of nature and the continuity of the universe. Question 25. How did Anaximenes' understanding of air pave the way for later thoughts? Anaximenes, by arguing that air forms substances through the processes of condensation and rarefaction, drew attention to the idea of formation through physical processes. This approach laid the foundation for the idea that nature can be explained by mechanical laws. Question 26. How did the Milesian School's way of thinking influence philosophical inquiries? By stripping natural events from mythological explanations and placing them on a rational ground, they developed the cause and effect relationship and critical thinking that formed the basis of philosophical inquiry. Question 27. What are the criticisms of the Milesian School regarding nature? Milesian philosophers criticized human-centered and divine approaches to explaining nature. According to them, nature should be understood by its own order and laws. Question 28. How has the Milesian School's understanding of the universe contributed to modern science? The Milesian School laid the foundations for branches of science such as cosmology and physics by developing the idea that the universe can be understood as a whole. The idea that the universe has an orderly structure and that this order can be studied is one of the main principles of modern science. Question 29. What are the philosophical methods of the Milesian School? The Milesian School used the methods of observation, reasoning, and abstraction. By combining speculative thinking with a rational method to understand nature, they created the first systematic philosophical method. Question 30. How did the Milesian School strike a balance between reason and observation? The Milesian philosophers used both observational data and the logical interpretation of this data together to understand nature. For example, Thales observed the solar eclipse, but instead of resorting to supernatural explanations, he explained it with a logical order. This balance formed the basis of the scientific method. Questions about the Eleatic school and philosophical thoughts. Question 31. What is Parmenides' understanding of being? According to Parmenides, being is one and unchanging. According to him, being is continuous, indivisible, and eternal. By saying, being is, non-being is not, he argued that only what exists is real and that the change and plurality presented by our perceptions are an illusion. Question 32. According to Parmenides, are change and motion possible? No, they are not possible. According to Parmenides, change and motion involve the concept of non-being because for something to transform into something else, it must cease to be. However, there is no non-being. Therefore, change and motion are merely an illusion. Question 33. What do Zeno's paradoxes mean? Zeno's paradoxes were created to show that motion and change are logically inconsistent. For example, The Achilles and the tortoise paradox argues that the faster one cannot overtake the slower one, emphasizing that motion is a perceptual illusion. Question 34. Why does the philosophy of the Eleatic school philosophers have an important place in the history of philosophy? The Eleatic school houses the first philosophers to systematically study metaphysics by prioritizing reasoning over perception. They questioned the foundations of philosophical thought with arguments based on logical contradictions. Question 35. How did the ideas of the Eleatic school find a response in the philosophy of later periods? Plato's theory of forms and Aristotle's understanding of being were influenced by the metaphysical arguments of the Eleatic school. Also, developments in logic and mathematics in the modern period were inspired by Zeno's paradoxes. Question 36. What are the implications of Parmenides' understanding of being? Parmenides' understanding of being shaped the basic metaphysical concepts of Western philosophy. His ideas had a profound impact on thoughts about being and non-being, as well as Plato's world of forms and Aristotle's ontological categories. Question 37. What does Zeno's paradox that the faster one cannot overtake question? This paradox argues that motion is logically impossible. By arguing that Achilles cannot overtake a tortoise, it questions that motion is not based on a rational basis through the idea of infinite divisibility. Question 38. What are the philosophical methods of the Eleatic school? The Eleatic school used the methods of logical analysis and deduction. This method, which develops arguments especially through contradictions, has been accepted as an ideal tool for testing ideas. Question 39. How is Parmenides' understanding of reality related to Plato's theory of forms? Parmenides' understanding of reality is unchanging, and one inspired Plato's world of forms. Expanding on Parmenides' ideas, Plato argued that the sensory world is deceptive and that reality can only be grasped by the mind. Question 40. How does the Eleatic school define the difference between reality and perception? The Eleatic school argues that reality is unchanging, continuous and logical. Perception is illusory and temporary. The change and plurality based on our perceptions are an illusion that cannot be explained by reason. Question 41. What is the meaning of Zeno's paradoxes about motion today? Zeno's paradoxes contributed to the development of the concepts of infinity and limit in modern mathematics. In particular, the foundations of differential and integral calculus are related to the search for solutions to Zeno's paradoxes. Question 42. What are the philosophical implications of Parmenides' statement, "Being is, non-being is not"? This statement points to the integrity and continuity of the universe. At the same time, by arguing that the concept of non-being is not meaningful, it provides a fundamental basis in terms of metaphysics and logic. Question 43. What are the other philosophical schools of thought that developed under the influence of the Eleatic school? The influence of the Eleatic school has been seen in schools such as Platonism, Aristotelian metaphysics, and Stoicism. Also, Kant's critique of pure reason and Heidegger's ontological inquiries in the modern period carry the influences of this school. Question 44. What kind of questions does the Eleatic school ask about the essence of thought? The Eleatic school questioned the essence of thought with questions such as what is reality? Is change possible? Is perception or reason more reliable? And laid the foundation for metaphysics and epistemology. Question 45. How did Parmenides' ideas create an impact in the field of metaphysics? Parmenides laid the foundations of metaphysical thought by placing the concepts of being and reality on a rational basis. His ideas are the starting point for all discussions on being, non-being, and change in Western philosophy. Questions about Heraclitus and philosophical thoughts. Question 46. What is the philosophical meaning of Heraclitus' statement, "Everything flows"? This statement expresses that everything in the universe is in a constant state of change, that nothing is permanent. According to him, being in the universe is a continuous process of flow and transformation. Question 47. According to Heraclitus, how is change and the nature of the universe? According to Heraclitus, the universe is in a constant state of change, and this change takes place in an order. The conflict and harmony of opposites constitute the basic structure of the universe. Question 48. What does Heraclitus's fire symbolism represent? Fire, for Heraclitus, is the basic substance of the universe and a symbol of change. Fire represents continuous transformation, destruction, and recreation. Question 49. What does Heraclitus's statement, "The whole world is a fire," express? This statement describes that the universe is in a constant state of change and transformation. The universe, like fire, burns, changes, and reaches a new order. Question 50. How did Heraclitus's concept of logos take its place in philosophy? Logos, according to Heraclitus, is the rational principle that governs the order and functioning of the universe. This principle, which ensures order and unity in the universe despite all changes, has become a fundamental concept for later philosophers in the sense of reason, order, and universal law. Question 51. What are the main philosophical differences between Heraclitus and Parmenides? While Parmenides argues that being is unchanging, Heraclitus argues that constant change and flow are the fundamental nature of the universe. While Parmenides emphasizes a logical unity, Heraclitus embraces the idea of the unity of opposites. Question 52. How did Heraclitus's ideas influence later philosophers? Heraclitus's ideas were adopted especially by philosophers such as Stoicism and Hegel. It can be seen that Hegel's dialectical method was inspired by Heraclitus's concepts of change and the unity of opposites. Question 53. According to Heraclitus, what is the way to reach true knowledge? To reach true knowledge, it is necessary to understand the universal order, logos. The way to do this is to go beyond sensory experiences and develop reason and an inner understanding. Question 54. What is Heraclitus's moral understanding? Heraclitus argues that individuals should conform to natural laws and universal order, logos. Morality is a reflection of the universal order and is related to the balance of opposites. Question 55. What are Heraclitus's views on the relationship between the individual and society? According to Heraclitus, the individual is a part of society, and the social order is also a reflection of the logos. It is necessary for individuals to understand the universal order for the harmony and balance of society. Question 56. What does Heraclitus's understanding of language and the way he uses language express? Heraclitus's language, full of aphorisms, expresses his deep and multi-layered thoughts. Language for him is a tool to make people think and encourage discovery rather than to convey meaning directly. Question 57. How is Heraclitus's natural philosophy related to his understanding of being? Heraclitus's natural philosophy is based on constant change and transformation. This understanding is related to his seeing being as a dynamic process rather than a static one. Question 58. How does Heraclitus define the relationship between knowledge and experience? According to Heraclitus, sensory experiences are a beginning for knowledge, but true knowledge can only be reached through reason and logos. Question 59. What is the role of time in Heraclitus's philosophy? Time in Heraclitus's philosophy is a fundamental element of change and flow. Everything changes and transforms in time, but this change is within an order governed by logos. Question 60. How has Heraclitus's philosophy contributed to modern philosophical thought? Heraclitus's idea of change and the unity of opposites has been influential in areas such as process philosophy, dialectical method, and system thinking in modern philosophy. It has also inspired scientific approaches to understanding the dynamic structure of the universe. We've come to the end of this journey that we started with 60 questions, but there's so much more to discover on the endless horizons of philosophy. Don't forget to watch our second video to delve deeper into your curiosities and continue with new questions. See you in the next video.